morning, Year 12. Today we're going to be looking at theme 1E for ethics. We have jumped back to ethics and intuitionism. This is part of our meta-ethics section of theme 1, and we have already looked at naturalism. Today we're going to look at intuitionism, and we're going to focus on the scholar more. As always, we're going to start with our retrieval quiz. So I'm making you remember or bring to mind knowledge from a previous lesson. Most of these questions are from our naturalism lesson because there are obvious links between the two topics, but there is a little bit of philosophy knowledge in there as well. So just jot down these answers. I'm going to mark them together in a moment. So if you put me on pause and answer these 5 questions. So if we just run through the answers together. So the main scholar for ethical naturalism is Bradley. Now you might remember that Bradley is not an ethical naturalist, but he has written about it. Number 2, the challenge from Hume to ethical naturalism is the is-ought problem, that you can't jump from saying that something is like something to then turning that into a moral statement and saying you ought to or you ought not to do something. What fallacy did Moore find with ethical naturalism? That's the naturalistic fallacy, and we're going to have a look at that again in a little bit more detail later on in this lesson. So if you don't know that, we will fix that problem a little bit later. A priori knowledge, this is something you should know from philosophy. That's knowledge that's independent of experience, or knowledge that comes before experience. That's a key term that you should have used when you looked at Ansel and the ontological argument. For Ansel, God exists is a priori knowledge. And which ethical theory states that we should aim to bring about the most good? We haven't studied utilitarianism in its own right yet, but utilitarianism is the answer. We did refer to utilitarianism when we looked at Bradley as an influence on Bradley. So give yourself a mark out of 5. On our team's homepage, I will put the question, what did you get for the quiz? And you can let me know there, and let me know which one you got wrong, because that helps me spot if there's been an issue with our teaching, and I can go back and fill in that gap. Along with today's assignment, but also on the files page on Microsoft Teams, I have put a Cornell Notes page. So that's what you're going to hand in to me on Teams at the end of this lesson, your Cornell Notes for today. And in particular, I'm going to be paying close attention to your summary statement at the end. So remember, in your Cornell Notes, you put the topic. So today it would be more intuitionism, or subject is ethics. Here, more intuitionism. And then you're going to put down sort of the main ideas, the subheadings for the lesson, and your notes go there. And then you're going to give me a sort of a 2-sentence summary of what we have learnt today. And that will be my way of checking that you understand. So let's carry on. Intuitionism, an ethical theory that's particularly popular at the start of the 18th century. And a lot of the thinkers and the theories that we are looking at in theme 1 are from roughly around the second half of theme 1, are roughly from around the 18th century. And remember, I said to you that we are reaching a point in history where lots of accepted ideas and knowledge are being questioned or even rejected. The authority of religion is definitely being questioned and rejected, and new ideas are being put into place. And those new ideas are based on rational, logical thought rather than religious thought or scripture, and often based on observations in society. That would definitely be the case for utilitarianism, would be the case for naturalism, not for intuitionism, which might account for its decline as we move into the later part of the 18th century. Intuitionism says that there are self-evident moral facts that cannot be defined but can be known. So it's obvious, I feel it in my gut what is good, but I can't necessarily, I can't define the word goodness. However, there are moral facts. This is a realist theory. There are moral facts out there, well, not really out there, they're in here, they're within us. And they come before experience, they're a priori. But they're not based on your opinion. You can have your opinion on what is or isn't good, but that doesn't mean that it's right. And they're not relative to culture. So they're universal moral truths. The main scholars are Moore and Pritchard, and Intuitionism can also be known as ethical non-naturalism. It's non-naturalistic because it's not about gathering evidence from the natural world, which you were doing in naturalism. So I can look at, remember Bradley says, I can look at society, I can look at what works, I can also look at what my role is in bringing about a moral society. Intuitionism, you don't need to look at the outside world, it's all inside you. So these are going to be some of the information you're going to add to your Cornell notes. And we are doing broad brushstrokes, so you will probably want to go back and embed from your textbook and revision guide and the extra notes that I'm going to give you. So, a very, very brief introduction to G.E. Moore. So his dates are 1873 to 1958. The book that's of interest to us is Principia Ethica. He is a British moral philosopher and he is hugely influential on British and American moral philosophy. And one of the things that he says about moral philosophy is that we have been asking the wrong kinds of questions. We're asking questions to which there is not an answer. For example, what does the word good mean? We can know what is good, but we can't define it. So, have a think back to the starter quiz, to naturalism. What do we already know about G.E. Moore? So we have met G.E. Moore before in naturalism. So thinking about you preparing for exams, you might use G.E. Moore as a criticism of naturalism or in his own right in theme 1E, which is intuitionism. So G.E. Moore, and this is the naturalistic fallacy, said that you can't define an ethical property like goodness or badness in the same way as a natural one. So you can't define good, for example, in the same way as you define horse or even table. Good, like the colour yellow, and remember we did this in class, is an example of something that is sui generis, it's one of a kind. Nice little word to use there. It can't be broken down into its constituent parts. It can't be simplified for a definition. So you might remember in class we were defining things like house and table and horse, and very often we were saying what properties a horse has. So something with a mane and 4 legs, etc. You can't do that with yellow, according to Moore, and you can't do that with good. And so the word good, like the word yellow, is one of those words that can't be simplified down further and can't be defined. And that's going to be an issue for any kind of ethical theory that starts with a definition of goodness. So we keep using this word intuition or intuitionism, but what does that mean? So your intuition is innate knowledge. That means knowledge that is naturally inside of you. It's different though from a belief. It's not come from a higher divine source or a hunch. It's not based on empirical evidence like so much else is at this time of the 18th century, when scientific knowledge is really important. This is not based on observations from society. It's not based on anything rational. It's something that's immediately simple and understandable and self-evident. It would be worth you in your notes getting down some definitions of what you mean by intuition. That's going to be useful for an essay. And now let's just add a little bit more detail about intuitionism. So Moore says that all humans have an inbuilt ability to know right from wrong. So we all have that ability. However, moral intuition is something that does come with maturity. A little bit like children learn to recognise numbers. It comes with experience. However, that doesn't mean that numbers are a priori. They're an example of analytical knowledge. But you still need some moral maturity and experience of life to recognise them. And it's the same with morality. So although morality is not based on observations of society, you do need some kind of maturity and life experience to deal with morality. And Moore, like our utilitarians, says that we have a duty to bring about the most good. So here's an example of a consequential intuitionist. Again, this is information that you might want to put me on pause and add to your Cornell notes. Now, although intuitionism can be seen as an alternative to and a criticism of naturalism, they do have quite a bit of common ground. It's a moral realist theory. It's cognitive and objective. There are moral truths that can be known, but those moral truths are inside of you. They're in your intuition. They're not out there to be discovered. Moral judgments can be right or wrong. And they are not subjective, they are objective. Again, this is information that you want to get down in your Cornell notes, and in next lesson we're going to be doing a quiz that's going to be testing this. So now that we have finished this, I want you to go and have a look at the written notes that I have attached to this assignment, and I want you to complete your Cornell notes and submit those for today. Thank you.